I want to thank everyone here for being a part of this live event and to those viewing this recording. I'm so happy to see so many new and familiar faces joining us. This community is growing and I'm grateful to all of you for being a part of it. As always, I got to give a loving shout out to my amazing, wonderful parents, Eddie and Lori, who are the best human beings I know. They're always there for me and always here for these events. I also need to thank all of the Holocaust survivors and their family members for sharing theirs and their families' testimonies with us. And a very special thank you to today's guest, Dana Arschin, who I am so grateful to call colleague and friend. Welcome to the premiere episode of 3G Thursdays, a program that spotlights grandchildren of Holocaust survivors and their families' testimonies. My name is Michael Mantell. I'm a psychotherapist, educator, and 3G, a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. I started these programs back in 2020 after being confronted with rampant anti-Semitism from peers and colleagues. One conversation, which started with sharing resources during a Holocaust Remembrance Day with a group of mental health professionals and students, quickly devolved into an attack on Jews, including the accusation that Jews used the Holocaust narrative to oppress and kill others. These interactions sparked anger and fear in me. And then I had an idea to turn my energy and attention to empowering my community and our allies. These programs were the result of that, which started in October 2020 with the first Sundays with Survivors featuring Irving Roth of blessed memory. Have now featured dozens of Holocaust survivors and their family members. It's opened up to writers, advocates, educators, and experts, reached thousands of people all over the world, and raised over $50,000 to support Holocaust education, museums, foundations, and other important Jewish causes. I'm so grateful that we've been going over 3.5 years strong and counting. These programs honor the memory of Holocaust survivors and hopefully cultivate Jewish pride and allyship and combat Jew hatred. Today, we are honored to be in the presence of an amazing human being, Dana Arschin, who will be sharing her Poppy story with us. Dana Arschin is a 3-time Emmy Award-winning journalist and the first ever storyteller for the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. Prior to her role with the museum, she spent 6 years working as an on-air general assignment reporter and fill-in anchor for Fox 5 News, covering the New York tri-state area. Dana is also the proud granddaughter of Holocaust survivor Nat Ross, born Nusen Rosenberg, her Poppy. Unfortunately, he passed away in December 2023 at 101 years old. In 2018, Dana traveled to Poland to learn more about her ancestors murdered in the Holocaust. She shot, wrote, and produced 3 short films on her journey for Fox 5. She won her 2nd New York Emmy Award for one of those films, entitled The Forgotten Camps. She previously reported for News 12, The Bronx and Brooklyn, where she shot, wrote, and edited all of her stories. During her tenure at News 12, Dana won her first New York Emmy Award for her reporting on the city's cleanup efforts in Brooklyn during the 2014 snowstorms. She also won first place 2 years in a row at the New York Press Club Awards for her reporting in Brooklyn. She won her 3rd New York Emmy in October 2023 for reporting in a Fox 5 special called Towers of Heroes. Following her presentation, we will open the program for Q&A. At that time, please feel free to raise your virtual hand by using the hand raise emoji, or type your questions or comments into the chat box for me to share for you, or you can simply unmute yourself at that time to speak. And just 2 quick announcements before we begin. On Monday, July 22nd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, please join us for via Zoom for the premiere episode of Mondays Among the Nations, featuring Anne and Phelim, 2 Irish Catholic investigative journalists who traveled to Israel after October 7th to uncover the truth of what happened. In November 2023, they traveled throughout Israel and interviewed survivors, rescuers, and those who lost loved ones. They turned these tragic, moving, and heroic stories into the play October 7th in Their Own Words, which just wrapped up its world and New York City premiere in June 2024. Anne and Phelim will be joined by the show's award-winning director, Jeffrey Cantor, and 7 cast members from the show. They'll share a clip from that production, take us through the life of the show, and tell us what's next for that powerful play. And on Sunday, August 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll be joined by Israeli actor and combat commander Yadin Gelman, who fought Hamas for 10 straight hours on October 7th. He will be speaking about his harrowing experience and yet another program you do not want to miss. I want to thank you all for being here. And now I'd like to welcome, and turn it over to Dana Arschin. Dana, thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. I am so grateful that this opportunity. Also, I didn't know that it was your premiere 3G Thursdays. I know you've been doing so many virtual presentations for several years now, as you mentioned. So I'm honored to be the first 3G Thursday. Michael, for anyone who doesn't know, is the most incredible human who volunteers his time to do all of this. He doesn't make a penny off of anything he does. Michael, you're an inspiration. You've been an amazing and such supportive friend. I just can't thank you enough for not only this opportunity, but it's really an opportunity to keep my Poppy's story alive. And I never say no to the chance to keep his legacy alive. So thank you. A very special thank you also to my parents, to Sharon and Artie Arschin, who are watching right now. They also support me in everything I do, and none of this would be possible without them. And then all of you, it is a beautiful summer night and you are choosing to be on Zoom with me right now. The fact that you took the time out of your evening, your summer, to be here with me means the world to me. And I know that my Poppy is smiling down. So thank you, thank you, thank you. A little bit about me. I know, thank you for that extensive bio and intro that you gave me. But I was a news reporter for a long time. There's a guy, Anthony, in here who has been one of my followers and viewers, who became a friend of mine since my early News 12 days. Anthony, thanks for coming. So I started as a one-woman show, and at every station and every school project I had the chance, I would do a Holocaust project or a Holocaust segment. I did a 2-part series on survivors for News 12, and then I did 27, I think I counted the other day, 27 Holocaust survivor stories while I was at Fox 5 in that ballpark range, including 3 short films. And I became so passionate about this work, of course, because of my Auschwitz survivor Poppy, but more so because of the obligation that I feel to keep these stories alive. So it's going to be a heavy night tonight as I show you some clips, and you'll hear my Poppy's firsthand testimony. But I thought we would start with something light. I wanted to quickly show you my start in the 5th grade. And bear with me, hopefully it works. A little bit of an issue before. No. Okay. Mike and I tested it out 2 seconds ago. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to try one thing and close out for a second and see if this works. There we go.
JBK Studios proudly presents Spotlight on Jackson. Today is November 20th, 1997.
Jackson participated in the New York City Marathon. Here with Mr. Waska is JBK reporter Dana Arschin.
Thanks, Evan. So, Mr. Waska, how did you prepare for the marathon?
Well, I had to do a lot of running. The biggest point of my practice time, I was running about 40 miles a week, and just about every day for 4 months.
So, what was your goal?
My goal was, in this year of running the marathon, I wanted to beat my time from last year.
So I won't make you guys watch the whole thing, but fast forward, 20-something years later, and here I am in New York City reporting for Fox 5. No, let's see, one more time. I'll just show
In
you.
all, about 2,500 cameras will be given to uniformed officers. The program is expected to be fully implemented by the end of this year. An hours-long hearing in the building behind me about Rikers Island, while down here on the street, protesters coming out demanding that more Rikers inmates be released as soon as possible. As the number of shootings spirals out of control, Mayor de Blasio is calling on the state to open courts back up. Lori, good evening. And Mayor de Blasio expected to be here in about an hour from now at 6 to kick off the city's Juneteenth weekend.
So as you can imagine, I did this reporting for 12 years plus graduate school. So I have a lot of clips that I can show you. This is a resume tape, a montage, a reel as we create in this industry. So this is what I was doing with my time, but on the side at Fox 5 is when I created that series. I would work on it on any free minute I had. And I became so passionate that I pitched myself to the Holocaust Museum on Long Island to become their first ever Holocaust storyteller. Andrea Bolender, I know her significant other Barry is on tonight. Andrea was the chairwoman at the time who saw this vision that I had and was so welcoming, and I would not be here if not for Andrea. So I'm so grateful to Andrea and to HMTC, which is what we call our museum, the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, for, you know, being innovative and seeing that these stories need to be told, and for giving me that opportunity. I go around every week and interview Holocaust survivors, and then I create documentaries on their lives. And I just interviewed a survivor in the Bronx today. Her story is amazing. So just to give you an idea of how much I do this, I do it literally every single week. So the picture I'm showing you now is, even though I am doing this with you virtually, I used to go into classrooms all the time. And I don't know if you could see in the back corner, that's me in the blue, and then that's my poppy and my grandma next to me. I used to go into classrooms and share my grandfather's story. And I would say to the kids, don't mind this couple sitting in the corner. They are just old family friends who live in the neighborhood who I invited to the presentation. And then I would share my poppy's story. And at the end, people would be crying. And then I would say to them, I lied to you guys. This is my poppy over there. And people would run up to him. You could see in these pictures, they would hug him. They would kiss him. This is a long time ago. It's probably a good 10 plus years ago. They would ask to see the number on his arm. So he knew the work that I was doing to keep his legacy alive, and having him go into those classrooms with me was so special. He's probably come to about 3 or 4 classrooms with me. And what was amazing is most of the students we spoke to were non-Jewish students, and they really appreciated his story. And they all said that this was a story that they would remember for the rest of their lives. And I'm so honored to share his story with you tonight. So we're going to talk about Auschwitz. I know a lot of you on here do have Holocaust ties, but if there is anyone who's unfamiliar, Auschwitz was the largest of the Nazi death camps. More than 1 million innocent men, women, and children survived. Were murdered. But what's fascinating is that it also had the most survivors because of how large the camp was. So it was the largest killing extermination camp, and it was the largest camp of survivors because they needed so many inmates for forced labor. And that is how my poppy survived. But you'll hear how miraculous his story was. So he was born Nusen Rosenberg on March 8th, 1922, and he passed away just shy of his 102nd birthday on December 23rd, 2023. And I was with him in Florida when he passed. And it was very special for me to be able to tell him that I was going to keep his legacy alive. So he was born in Pultusk, Poland. I always mispronounce it. And I just learned after my second trip to Poland that the L is pronounced like a W. So Pultusk, Poland, to Sarah and Yankel Rosenberg. When the war broke out, he was one of 9 children. 2 of his siblings actually died before the war in tragic accidents. And he was actually named after his grandfather, whose name was Natan Torfstein. And Natan Torfstein was the chief rabbi of Stanislavov. There are 2 Stanislavovs. One is closer to Warsaw and one is now in Ukraine. And it is amazing to me to think that I come from this incredible rabbinical family. And it's also amazing to me that I have this photo. And during the Q&A, if you guys are curious, I can tell you a little bit about how I was able to recover some of these photos. So this is Natan. He died in 1921. My papi was born the next year in 1922. And his name was Chaim Nusen after Natan. Some of you might know that in the Jewish religion, to be named after someone, it's after they pass away, and it's just the first initial. So Natan, my papi Nusen. And I always believed that him being named after such an incredible figure gave him the strength to survive. I always like to believe that his grandfather was living in him. So this is my great-great-grandfather. So when the war first broke out, my papi was 17 years old, and the Nazis were invading Poland quickly, and they knew that they had to hide. They left everything in Pultusk, and they went, which sadly wasn't much. My papi came from a family of rope makers, generations of rope makers, making rope for anything you can imagine, from horse and buggy to machinery and equipment. And they were very poor. I don't know if it's because he made very little money or if they had 11 children, but they lived in a one-bedroom apartment. They all shared beds and bedrooms, but it was, you know, traditional Orthodox Jewish family, and they loved each other. They fought like normal siblings, but they got along beautifully. They always observed Shabbat and all the high holidays. And they lived a very happy life before the war, but of course they did experience anti-Semitism even before the war started. When the Germans first came to Pultusk in their town, they were rounding up Jewish men with beards, and obviously because the beard signified that they were religious Jewish men, and they were all shot and thrown into a mass grave. My papi's father, Nusen Rosenberg, was one of those men rounded up and murdered. And I remember my papi telling the story of the last time that he saw his father. His father was basically ripped away from them in the street, and he looked back at his family with terrified eyes, not knowing what happened to him. And that was the last time he ever saw his dad. And they found out soon after what had happened to all the men with beards in the town. So, I mean, imagine having to grieve that and make sense the fact that your father was just murdered in cold blood, and then also figuring out how the rest of the family was going to survive. So my grandma Sarah, my great-grandmother Sarah, she felt that the safest was to go to Warsaw, where it was a bigger city and would be easier to hide. So they spent, the whole family that was there, spent days walking at night and then hiding in the woods during the day. And then they eventually got to Warsaw just to be rounded up quickly and thrown into a ghetto in the city of Gostynian. And that's where they were living in inhumane conditions. The fact that they were even able to walk and get themselves to Warsaw was miraculous. I'm going to show you now some clips. These clips were taken in 1996 when my papi was 74 years old. He was interviewed by the Steven Spielberg Shoah Foundation, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's pretty incredible. The Shoah Foundation has made it its mission to capture about 55,000 video testimonials. And here is a quick clip of my papi talking about life in the ghetto.
People were dying. What can I say? And it's subhuman condition. People were dying, and there was no medicine, no doctors, nothing. Whoever lasted, lasted. Whoever passed away died. That's what the kind of a lifetime in a ghetto.
You know, several families crammed into small apartments, barely any food, inhumane conditions. And soon after arriving at this ghetto, Gostynian, Germans were rounding up one male from each family to go to a forced labor camp. And my papi, who was fit, he was 17, he was of prime age, he bravely volunteered to go. And when he said goodbye to his family in the ghetto, he didn't know if that was going to be the last time that he would ever see them. And he remembers saying that goodbye.
We kissed everybody goodbye. We never knew that I finally ever see them back. We shot it. Then I went to the first labor camp. It's called a town in Polish. It was by the German border. They used to call Kolma.
So you just heard him mention that forced labor camp Kolmar, which was in Germany or near the German-Polish border. And my poppy was one of just about 50 men at that camp. And the workers there were tasked with cleaning out the sewer systems and building roads. So my poppy was assigned to work in the sewer. And a few times he would find rotten potatoes while he was down there. And every week or so, German officers would make all the prisoners strip and take their thin uniforms that they were wearing and throw them in a big pot of boiling water. The reason for this was that so infection and disease wouldn't spread throughout the camp, and the Nazis also didn't want anything to spread to them. So my poppy found a way to tie in just the tiniest pieces of rotten potatoes or any rotten food that he would find down in the sewers into his uniform. And every few weeks when they had to throw it in the boiling water, that's how he would get a tiny little extra bit of nourishment by having this rotten potato that he would boil. And he was starving and suffering from malnourishment just like everyone else. So by throwing in these rotten potatoes, it just got him a little extra energy until a guard caught him one day.
And they put me in on a bench, stretched out, and they gave me a 15 or 16 fly. And I hope I wouldn't get this anymore. And then they put on a pot of cold water and they set me in to take off the pain from the. That was because I carried about 4 or 5 potatoes in my pants.
And after that, my poppy, for being caught, was forced to start digging his own grave.
I had to, like, and everything is done, and a day later, fortunately it wasn't me, they brought in another guy, a Jew. He was already unconscious from beating and everything, and all of us had to come out in the front by the grave, and the German officer made a speech.
What did he say?
He said, "Erstmal ausruhen. Eure Parole ist nur Arbeit. Wenn ihr nicht Arbeit leisten kann, hat bei uns keine Werte." I mean, if you want me to translate it into English, listen to me, Jews. By us, you have to work. When you can last your work, when you can complete your work, or you can work, you have no value to us. And then became 3 Gestapo, and they killed him. Which they brought in that guy who was unconscious, and we buried him in top. Fortunately, it wasn't for me.
And you see my poppy smile slightly there at the end. And that grave wound up not being for him, but that smile is not indicative of the way he felt. He felt guilt for the rest of his life, knowing that he had built and dug this grave for another innocent man. I also thought the clip was so incredible. As you heard my poppy recite the German commands, his memory was so sharp, even until the day he died. You know, there are a lot of stories he shared with me where he remembered verbatim commands and conversations from so many decades ago, and it was really incredible. He also describes the food that he made that he was forced to eat at Kolmar. Well, not forced to eat, but if he didn't eat it, he would have nothing.
Not the original food. Everything was substitute. Like they had bread, it's done from a lot of sawwood. The sawdust. You know, there were a lot of splinters in the bread too. In other words, it wasn't pure bread, it was more wood dust from sawdust than flour. That's the way, was the bread. And the tea was leaves from trees.
And after it was complete at Kolmar, Poppy was rounded up and thrown into a cattle car like an animal. For days, he was trapped inside that car with no food, no drink, no sanitary place to go to the bathroom. Dozens of Jews crammed into that small cattle car like sardines. And their destination was the infamous Auschwitz concentration camp. And I actually took all of these photos myself. on my first trip to Poland in 2018. And I was on the March of the Living, which I can explain later for anyone unfamiliar. And they took us into these cattle cars that had been preserved. And it was pretty horrifying to stand in there and imagine what our brothers and sisters so many decades ago were forced to do. So he arrived at Auschwitz and he remembers perfectly what it was like.
We arrived this afternoon, we arrived in the evening. And they start yelling, screaming to get out. You know, we had such a fear. It was unbelievable, weeping and hitting. We had to take off the civilian clothes.
What did you see when you first got to Auschwitz?
We knew right where we saw the barbed wire, and you know, we saw the gate, we're right near the gate where it said Arbeit macht frei.
Those words that he just said are Arbeit macht frei, the infamous words at the gate of Auschwitz, which in German means work will set you free. Obviously a very cruel deception for those just arriving to camp. And those words are at the main gate of Auschwitz, which is called Auschwitz I, where mostly political prisoners were kept. My poppy was then sent to Auschwitz II, called Birkenau, which is located about 3 miles away. And this at Birkenau is where the mass murders really took place. This is where all the crematorium were in Auschwitz. And when my poppy got there, he was forever marked with the tattoo that you saw earlier, 143499. He was thrown into a barrack, and each morning he had to stand in line for selection, where German guards would decide who would live that day and who would go to the gas chambers. But the best thing to happen to my poppy in Birkenau was when he reunited with his brother, Moishe, who you can see in the.
My younger brother, oh, we hugged us, we kissed. And I asked him, you were later with my mother. I mean, when I left for the first one selected to go to Force Leviken, what happened? He says he don't know what happened with him. They took him away. He knew it, they took him away. So he told me all the story about him. And I didn't expect I would be able to see any of my family again.
So that clip always gets me because the strength that he showed every step of the way, and every day he made a decision to live, despite knowing that his family had been so brutally murdered. He had learned from Moishe that 2 of their older brothers, Avromo and Yitzhak, had been shot and killed for trying to escape another camp. It was very emotional, grandfather, to learn that. Come on in, Mom. Come on in. Come here. This is my little girl, Maya. I bribed her with marshmallows to keep quiet downstairs, but she made her appearance. Say hi, Maya. I'm giving a story about Poppy. Can I finish up and come get you in a little bit? No, you want to sit here with me? Okay. She'll be learning this story eventually one day. Oh, Daddy's home. I just heard Daddy. Want to go get Daddy? Okay. Dad. Thank you. Parenting, I'm sure you can all relate, but my husband just got home and I'm in his office, if you can tell from the Brady jersey behind me. All right, so back to this story. So, I have an amazing story to tell you about my Maya later and her connection to Poppy. So my Poppy had learned from Moishe that 2 of their older brothers, Avromo and Yitzhak, you can see them in these pictures, had tried to escape. And they were killed for trying to escape from another camp. And it was very emotional for my grandfather to learn that and to also hear that his mom and other young siblings had been murdered. No one ever heard from them again, and they are believed to have been killed in a place called Babi Yar. Babi Yar, which is incredible to me that so many of us don't know about it. It was a massacre site in Ukraine where nearly 34,000 Jews were murdered in just 2 days. In 1941, 34,000 Jews in 2 days. So back to Birkenau for a moment. I wanted to let you know that when he was there, he came face to face with the notorious Dr. Joseph Mengele. And I've had my own fascination with Mengele lately. I have been doing so many stories on him, on survivors who have come face to face with him. I actually, while I was at Fox 5, interviewed 2 twins who survived Mengele experiments. And the fact that I was able to interview them was really incredible. So my poppy was face to face with Mengele. And Mengele was really the one who would decide who would be killed and who would be sent to the gas chambers. But he was also one of the people who would administer the gas himself. And he was known for doing these horrific medical experiments on children and twins.
Mengele was selecting us to work. That's right, in Birkenau.
What do you remember about him?
But then he came with a group of Gestapo. The Gestapo with he had a cane in his hand, and he pointed out this one over here, and the other soldiers with the adult. They made sure that guy who was on the left side shouldn't run to the right side. And that's what happened about for 1 week, every day on the appeal to be selected. Then, fortunate, I was selected with my younger brother to go to work in the Warsaw. We knew that we wouldn't go to the gas chamber.
So my poppy spent 3 months in Birkenau, and then he was transferred to a camp that he just mentioned called Jaworszno, which was nearby in one of many Auschwitz subcamps. He spent 2 years there doing hard labor, building electric power plants and working in the coal mines. And in Jaworszno, I'm going to share a clip in a moment. My poppy talks about possibly his most horrific memory. A group of 18 prisoners had built an underground tunnel from their barracks to the woods nearby and had been planning for many, many weeks an escape route. Somehow Nazi guards found out about their plan, and here's what happened next.
We marked at the camp. Suddenly we see all the Gestapo on the roofs with machine guns. And there was a long line with wood to hang up people with stools underneath. And the same story, we were frightened. We thought they were going to wipe us all out. But we had to witness this. They're going to hang those 18 guys, 18 Czechs. They were mostly, Jews, a little bit, not too many Jews in Czech, because they the one who tried to escape from the barrack. And they hanged up all the 18. And of course, they made a speech, the Germans, to a speaker, loudspeaker. There were thousands of prisoners to watch the hanging. They said, if you will ever think of this running away, or that's what will happen to you. And the prisoners, they start to yell the anthem of Czech, you know, that's, you can kill us, all of us. We'll remember, that one will be alive, we'll remember what you did to us, which I can tell you now what happened, what I witnessed. And the Germans know about it too.
So my poppy, by sharing that story with all of us, we are now witnesses, and it is our obligation to share that story and make sure those prisoners didn't die in vain. But having seen that, being forced to watch the hanging of these men, it encouraged my poppy to survive so that he could live to tell their story and the story of so many victims. He really wanted to make sure that their memories were never forgotten. And I could go on and on about the horrors that he witnessed at the camp, but I want to get to the death march. In January 1945, prisoners were being evacuated from Auschwitz because the Russian army was advancing. Prisoners had to march for days in what eventually became known as the Death March.
We started to march. A lot of them couldn't do it, and they killed them right on the spot, and they got it. We saw anybody who couldn't walk right away. They were walking with the German Lugers with the guns, and right on the spot they killed them, left alone in the garden. It was bitter cold in January, and we had to wear the wooden shoes with the snow sticking down. We couldn't even walk. You know, the legs are very twisting. We walked through the night and they killed a lot of them. A lot of them were killed because they couldn't walk. They're not physically fit to walk.
So during the march, it was freezing and my poppy suffered severe inflammation in his legs and feet, and he knew that he would not be able to go on much longer. The march had also turned into complete chaos, and Germans were not able to keep track of all the prisoners anymore. They were shooting people left and right. Prisoners were running in all directions. So when they stopped overnight to sleep, because the Germans needed to sleep too, my poppy and about 20 other prisoners were able to hide in a haystack. And while he was hiding, my poppy actually found a rusty wire, and he used it to try to scratch off the tattoo, because if he was caught, he didn't want to show that he was from Auschwitz, because yes, while they had non-Jews and political prisoners, if you were from Auschwitz, you were most likely a Jewish prisoner. So he hoped that if he were caught, that he'd be able to convince them that he was a political prisoner on the death march. So he was trying to get rid of that tattoo. And as you can imagine, by using a rusty wire on your arm didn't really go over very well. He got a massive infection on his arm. And also at the same time, from not being able to brush his teeth for years. I mean, imagine just the simple pleasures we have in life and the things we take for granted, like brushing our teeth every day. These prisoners in Auschwitz and any of these concentration camps in the ghettos didn't get to brush their teeth. So he had a massive infection also in his mouth, and it wound up creating a hole on the right side of his cheek. And if he drank liquid, it would actually come out the side of his face. And until the day he passed, he had a very small scar on his cheek. Back to the death march, it would take me forever to get through all the details, but I want to give you a very abbreviated version of what happened next. So Nazis did eventually find my poppy as he was hiding a few days later. And he was, in fact, able to convince them that he was not Jewish and he was a Polish political prisoner. And while Polish prisoners were also seen as lesser beings, they were not at the same level as Jews, and they weren't necessarily killed in the same way that Jewish prisoners were. And he was brought to a nearby prisoner of war camp where actually members of the British Brigade were imprisoned. And according to my poppy, I haven't really done my own research on this yet, but there was an agreement between the Germans and the British that British prisoners would not be killed. So the British Brigade, which also happened to have a few Jewish soldiers and a Jewish doctor in the brigade, was at that camp, the prisoner of war that he was taken to, and they took my poppy under their wing and they helped him hide there.
They gave me a cross to carry a cross, so I shouldn't be noticeable. And they gave me a name that I should call myself Standish James. That was a British prisoner who died. I should carry his name. And I couldn't speak a word of English. I was with them, but they cleaned me up. I had a British uniform with shoes, with a cross. I tried to show off my cross so nobody should be suspicious. And everybody asked me, how come you are a young guy? I said I was a volunteer. That's all I knew.
Yeah, so he looked he was so malnourished. He was young. He looked too young to be part of the British Brigade. So, and he didn't speak English. So he would just keep his mouth shut and they'd say this was our volunteer. And I always remember that name, Standish James. And as I'm listening right now, it just dawned on me that I should try to find out who Standish James' descendants are. I think that would be really fascinating. So thank you guys for just putting this in my head by having me play this tonight. Next, after that, I mean, I'm giving you a very abbreviated version. I mean, every day the details I could give you would take hours to get into. But the prisoners at that prisoner of war camp, including the British Brigade, were soon marched out of that camp. And while they were on the march, they were liberated by American soldiers. And this is such a beautiful clip. It's my poppy talking about being liberated.
We laid out on the street, we start kissing the soldiers, the tanks, everything. I kept on looking all the time if a German is behind me. Since 5 years, being frustrated in their prison camp. So I always thought maybe some Germans are still behind me.
Poland was the first country to be invaded in 1939. So Polish prisoners who survived were prisoners longer than really anyone from any other country. So he'd been a prisoner starting from being in a ghetto from 1939 till 1945. So it's incredible. And he, as he said, he always looked over his shoulder. Even for years after the war, he'd be paranoid and would be looking behind him, thinking that German soldiers with guns were following him. After that, my poppy made his way to England, where he was put into an orphanage and soon adopted by a Jewish British family named the Leaf family. And the father of the family was named Ernie Leaf, and he treated my poppy like he was his own son. He used to give him cash to go out at night and was always so good to him, always a roof over his head and a hot meal. And here's a photo of my poppy posing with Mr. Leaf's car, and he was wearing a suit that was donated to him. So Mr. Leaf had a son named Wally, who was just about the same age as my poppy. In the top left photo there, that's my poppy and Wally. He has also passed away, but our family stayed in touch with the Leaf family, their children, their grandchildren, for all these years. And you could see a picture of me and one of the girls, Jordan, on the bottom there, when she came to visit in New York a few years ago. They came here for my bat mitzvah. While we haven't seen them too much in recent years, they're always going to be like family to us. And what they did for my poppy and made him feel loved after, you know, his parents were murdered and he was an orphan was just really incredible. And we will always, you know, think of them as heroes for doing what they did. And this next clip, you know, after everything that my poppy went through, he never complained and he never asked why me. And he also never lost his faith in God.
It's more than a miracle. It's more than a miracle how I survived.
Did you pray to God at all during these years?
Well, yes, I still I'm not strictly Orthodox, but I pray with tefillin every day. You know, I don't skip it. When I go for vacation, I take it with me. I know if you tell the but I am considered lucky by living a life like this. Who's not holy? But every time, I don't consider to be lucky. I want to give my testimony. People shouldn't think when I'll pass away. How long could they survive it? Another 10 years, there will be nobody alive. So I want to tell the truth. How I went through in life. The people shouldn't think that nothing never happened. Because a lot of people denying it. That it never happened. They're making up stories. The Jew feels pity. They should know that I'm alive. I can tell some stories. A part of it, not the story is not everything. A part of it, what I've been through.
So ever since a young age, I've always been very aware of the fact that my poppy was a Holocaust survivor, but it wasn't really until the past 10 or 15 years or so that it became my mission to learn as much as possible. I know more about my poppy's story and my family history than anyone else in my family. In 2018, I traveled to Poland with that small video camera you see, so that I could document my journey. I joined a March of the Living trip, which is a trip where about approximately 10,000 people from all over the world gather at Auschwitz on Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day every spring. And they march from Auschwitz I to Auschwitz II, Birkenau. And that was my first time in Poland. I went to went to mass graves and camps all throughout the country. And it was really a life-changing and very emotional trip. On my last day there in 2018, I went to my poppy's hometown of Pultusk and to the street where he grew up on. His apartment building was no longer there, but I did go to the city's town hall to search for my family's birth certificates. And with remarkable luck, I found several of them, though I did have to do some bribing, if I'm being honest. It was very difficult. They they really didn't want to help people, and I had to go in and bring them a fancy box of chocolates in order to get them to search for some birth certificates for me. So I have very mixed feelings on Poland, but I just got back from another trip to Poland just last week, and I'll tell you more about that. And I do think the country is doing some incredible things to, to honor and preserve the history of Jewish life there. But I was able to get some of these birth certificates. I thought I had a picture here. Do I not? Here they are. So these birth certificates are amazing. Highlighted are the different signatures. The one in the middle, it says Nusen, that's my Poppy's birth certificate. And it was pretty incredible. I mean, they let me, this is the original papers. They let me touch the papers and the ink. I got to touch the ink from the pen of my great-grandfather, Nusen Rosenberg, my Poppy's dad. So I felt very connected to him, and it was amazing to read through that. And it was just incredible. And they are really well preserved. Anyone can go in and start searching through these books. So it was pretty amazing. This is Okopowa Jewish Cemetery in Warsaw, which is one of the world's largest Jewish cemeteries. And I went back to Warsaw on my last day in Poland before I flew home, and also in 2018. And I wanted to find my great-great-grandfather's tombstone. I know it's getting confusing with the great and the great-greats, but this is Natan Torstein, so my Poppy's grandfather. He was the man I mentioned who was the chief rabbi of Stanislavov. And the stone is in Hebrew and says that he was the chief rabbi who died during the holiday of Sukkot in 1921. And you can see at the top, there are books that are etched into the top of the stone, which indicate that he was a great scholar. And let me just go back 2 slides. This is me just 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, back in Poland. And you could see a tree actually fell down and knocked down the stone next to his, but his stone is still intact. And it was really beautiful to be able to reunite with him again. So I mentioned the Fox 5 short films that I did on my journey, The Forgotten Camps, March of the Living, and A Community Reborn. If you type in any of these names on YouTube, you can watch them. They're really fascinating. Holocaust scholar Michael Berenbaum, who's the world's leading Holocaust scholar, is the main narrator for these films, and he led me on my trip in 2018, and it was really incredible. And the reaction that I got for creating these films from our Fox 5 viewers who reached out really kind of spurred me to keep doing this work. And I have never looked back. It has been the most fulfilling work that I could ever do. I want to talk about this connection, this amazing connection between Maya and my Poppy. So I have a question. You can see me, right? Or do you only see the screen? Michael, give me a thumbs up if you see me. Yeah, so you saw Maya come in before. Yeah, I had to do a lot to I got the little one to bed by 6, and I bribed Maya with marshmallows to stay downstairs. But that was Maya. She's now almost 5 years old. She was probably 2 years old, maybe less than 2 years old, 18 months in this picture. This was during COVID, which is why my Poppy had a mask on. But Maya has 2 Hebrew names, Yehudit Arona. Yehudit is named after my husband's maternal grandmother, and Arona is after my Poppy's youngest brother, Aaron. But what's interesting, you could see the birth certificate on the bottom right. He was a boy named Aaron, but his birth certificate said Arona, which I guess that was maybe his Hebrew name too. So I'd done a lot of research. I have some family in Israel, and I had realized that of all my Poppy's siblings, Aaron was the only one who was murdered, and no one was ever named after him. So I didn't know if I was having a boy or girl. I wanted to be a surprise with both my girls. And I told my Poppy, I was speaking at a Yom HaShoah event. My Poppy was in the audience, and I said, I was very pregnant. I said, I'm telling my Poppy for the first time tonight that this baby in my belly is going to be named after his younger brother, Aaron. And all year I've been talking about Aaron. I found out that when he was in the ghetto, he snuck under a tiny little hole in the fence at night to search the streets to find scraps of food. And he would bring the food back into the ghetto to help feed the family. So such bravery at such a young age, only about 7 or 8 years old. So Maya was born, and I was actually in the Fox 5 studio. I haven't told that many people the story. I was in the makeup wheelchair. I was about to go live in studio on a story on Jeffrey Epstein. And the makeup artist was putting a fake eyelash on my eye. And I said to her, oh my God, I have to run to the bathroom. My water broke. And my water broke 14 days before my due date. And I went into labor and I give birth on July 27th and to a beautiful, healthy girl, Maya, Hebrew name, Yehudita Rona. And weeks later, I'm at my poppy's apartment and my mom is with me. And I was like, you know what? I'm very curious to pull up Aaron's birth certificate. I got it when I was in Poland and I got it translated. I'm curious to see what it says. I read the translation and Aaron was born on July 27th, 1932. Maya born July 27th, 2019. So this boy who I've been talking about for the entire year prior, saying that my daughter was going to be named after him, they share a birth date. So to me, that was such a sign that this is the work I'm supposed to be doing, that this little boy lives inside her. I know that was kind of a long story. Just to make it even crazier, 3 years later, I go into labor again, giving birth to my next child, also a surprise. The doctor said that I wasn't dilated at all and that I was going to go full term. 14 days exactly to my due date at 5 p.m., almost the exact same time. I'm in my kitchen chopping sweet potatoes and my water breaks. I go into labor, I give birth, and I had to cancel a speech I was supposed to make because it was Yom HaShoah. So I gave birth to my second baby on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, Harlow. So both of my girls have these incredible Holocaust significant birthdays, and it's just all of this reinforces that this is really what I'm meant to be doing. So I could go on and on and on. I haven't even told you half of my grandfather's story, but I know a lot of you on here, some of you are survivors. Thank you to our survivors for being here. I see Eva Kessner, who I just interviewed a few weeks ago. Thank you so much to the second generation survivors, the third generation survivors. If you're on here, it means that you care enough to keep the stories alive. So I thank you. And more than anything, thank you for helping me keep my Poppy story alive.
Wow. Thank you, Dana. It was absolutely amazing. I've heard you share your Poppy's testimony before. I get emotional, and every single time continue to get emotional. And having your daughter come into the conversation was absolutely beautiful. So I'm really glad that she took her marshmallows and came in anyway.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I don't have a TV platform anymore, but I post all of my stories on social media. I haven't figured out how to go viral on Facebook and Twitter just yet, but my Instagram videos are getting over 100,000 views. It's been pretty incredible. So if you want to see the work that I've been up to, find me on one of these platforms. You can also go to the HMTC website, hmtcli.org/stories, and you could see every story there that I've done for the Holocaust Museum. And what's amazing is these stories are actually still eligible to be submitted for Emmy Awards. Because so many organizations have gone to streaming platforms, they now have new rules. And if you create a specific type of format to your audience, you can still submit. So this is the first year I submitted HMTC stories. It's really hard to do. I don't know if I can get one, but I think it'd be pretty amazing to get a Holocaust Museum an Emmy Award. So it'd be my dream to bring a survivor there with me.
That would be amazing. And thank you for giving a shout out to Eva, who was also on Sundays with Survivors when we first started. And I'm so happy that you're here to have a survivor in our presence. And as you said, 2Gs, 3Gs, and even a 4G we had on here. I think it's absolutely beautiful. So we'll move to questions. We'll do the Q&A portion. And I'll share the links in our follow-up email so everyone has that, so they know how to follow Dana and the stories that she puts out there. And
if you have questions that I can't answer, my parents are on right now. And Michael, if you can manually unmute them if I give you the thumbs up, so they can help chime in if there are any questions that I don't know.
Awesome. So I just want to start by saying that I imagine that your Poppy was a huge inspiration to the work that you do, and that your work in Holocaust education was sort of impactful for your Poppy to know that his legacy is continuing. Can you talk about your interest and the connection to his story and the effect that it had on your relationship? Because I know not every single child or grandchild is interested. So if you could talk about that.
Yeah, and actually, before I forget, I have to give a plug for a fundraising event that I'm hosting on August 11th in Port Washington. It is called, it is for 3Gs, third generation survivors, grandkids of survivors. I'm trying really hard to bring in this next generation, because if the grandkids of survivors aren't interested in stories, then who is? So it's an event for 3Gs and supporters though, so non-Jews, non-3Gs, everyone is welcome, but it's really a push to try to get the young generation involved. So yeah, my poppy, you know, I grew up always seeing the number on his arm. 143499 was probably the first number I had memorized. And I was always very aware of the fact that my poppy was a Holocaust survivor. But when you're little and that's all you know, you don't really understand what that means. And as I got older, I got very involved with Chabad at my college campus at the University of Delaware. Shout out to Rabbi Snyderman. And I just started just to think a lot about my Jewish roots and heritage. And when I had moved to the city after getting my job at News 12, I had heard about 3GNY and this training program to learn your grandparents' story and go into classrooms to present it. And I was really inspired and I really wanted to join. And I finally had a schedule that allowed me to do so. And I learned my poppy's story. I went into a bunch of classrooms. Fortunately, just with 2 kids and working now, I'm just not able to anymore. But those experiences I had with him were amazing. And I truly, and Michael, I'm sure you feel the same way. It's my obligation. Like I said earlier, like every day, he saw people take their own lives on the electric fence. He chose to live every single day, and I have the most privileged life. So the least I can do is keep his legacy alive, be aware of the fact that I'm here and why I'm here, and make sure that the world never forgets. And how do we prevent hate, which we're seeing rise up all around the world and right here in our area, is to educate one person at a time. So that's really why I'm doing it.
Thank you. And if you do go to Dana's program, I will share the link so you can sign up for that. You can see Yadin Gelman at 2 p.m. and then have dinner with us at Dana's event with HMTC. I'll be there as well, so we can have a double header. And also you mentioned Andrea Bolander. I have to thank her as well. Like you, she helped me step comfortably into this space. And I think she's incredible for all of us. So thank you, Andrea. You do incredible work bringing Holocaust education to a broader audience. Dana, you reach people on social media and through media appearances and these news stories, taking Holocaust education out of the classroom. You're doing it, reaching more people, including more young people, in effect, educating folks about the Holocaust in untraditional ways. Can you talk about your trajectory from being a journalist, reporter, telling or sharing your poppy story to now becoming the first ever Holocaust storyteller? Can you share also what that is?
Yes. So it's funny, my parents, when I told them, I had worked really hard for my career and I left on the best of terms with Fox. In fact, they have me on to be a spokesperson quite often. My boss, Ahmad Oscar, is actually speaking at an event that I'm hosting. He's actually taking my students that I teach at the JCC on a tour of Fox 5 later next year. So I had this incredible experience there. And I worked so hard to make it and to get a job in the #1 market. And when I told my parents I was giving up my career to create a position that they'd never heard of, that didn't exist, they thought it was kind of too good to be true and impossible. And I just had a vision. I just knew that I could do it. And all I needed was a platform. And I didn't want to give up the skill set that I had worked so hard for, of learning how to write for broadcast and learning how to present and speak. And I tried to find a way I could do that, but also be like completely transparent. I wanted to be more present for my family. I was working, sometimes 11 to 13-hour days, if you include the commute. I was live 12 p.m., 5 p.m., and 6 p.m. almost every single day for the past 3 years of my job. It was really stressful, and I wanted to find something that was better fit for my family and was more fulfilling for me. but I could not have created this position without Fox. So my vision was to keep creating the same high quality Holocaust survivor stories that I had been doing for Fox, but instead of having a TV platform, posting them all over social media, where I probably have a chance to reach a lot more people. There's this new collaboration feature on Instagram, or fairly new, which is the reason why my stories are getting 100,000 views and more, because you can collaborate with these massive accounts where I tag them, and then the story shows up on their main feeds to their hundreds of thousands of followers. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone who's not familiar with Instagram, but it has been truly amazing. Even at the New York Emmys this year, they had asked me to be a presenter where I announced winners and categories, and they invited me up as the first storyteller for the Holocaust Museum. So, I mean, how amazing is that at the New York Emmy Awards with every single news station there, that I'm there representing as a presenter. So I'm really just trying to, break the mold, be innovative, be creative. And I think the sky's the limit. And I think storytelling is the future. I think any industry and any type of organization could use a storyteller.
Dana, you have interviewed dozens of Holocaust survivors. How do you find these Holocaust survivors, and how do you frame their stories?
That's such a good question. I don't even know how I find them. I'm at the point where people just keep reaching out to me, and that's amazing. Like the woman I interviewed today, I go, how'd you find me? And like, I don't know, someone just gave me your email. So I always call first. I, vet them. And like, I just spoke to a woman the other day, and she was born in 1945, and she really didn't remember anything. So it didn't make sense for me to go and interview her. But I speak to everyone on the phone first. I spread the word. I post on my Instagram times, and if anyone has survivors, let me know. I have to tell you, Michael, I have survivors booked every single week, almost through September. And I am like not even close to done with my list. I have just, there's one guy, I have to give him a shout out, Eliyahu Kutner. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. We've never met, but he just emails me like 10 survivors a week with their names and numbers. So, a lot of people in the space are just connected and have heard about the work I'm doing and are just doing it that way. In terms of how I tell the stories, I never go in with an idea. I always listen and then figure out what I'm going to take away from it. Auschwitz survivors, usually I focus on their Auschwitz story because they're incredible. The Auschwitz stories are usually the most fascinating ones. That being said, sometimes the children in hiding are even more fascinating because they survived. They have some of the raw original documents and photographs that a lot of camp survivors do not have. And then the younger survivors are really, really articulate, and they articulate the story so beautifully. So everyone has a different way that they tell their stories, and that's how I shape it. Sometimes I focus not on their Holocaust story, but on the life they built after. So on how they didn't let the Holocaust define them. It's hard to say. It's really whatever my gut tells me to focus on is how I decide to shape each story.
It's beautiful. I do have a lot more questions, so we'll go for as long as we can. If people have other questions, we'll hopefully be able to answer those as well.
Is there anyone who doesn't know how to write? I can see my parents possibly not knowing how to write in the chat. You can like raise your hand on here too, right?
Yeah, raise your hand, your virtual hand. You can unmute yourself. But in the meantime, I'm going to go back to asking some questions about your Poppy. So you talked about, focusing on people's life stories after. Before I ask you about his post-Holocaust story, can you share any information about his siblings or any family members who survived and how they reconnected?
Yes, so there were 9 siblings when the war broke out. I mentioned that 2 died before the war, which was common then. It's just a very different life. Of the 9 siblings, only 4 survived. It was my Poppy, Moisha, Simcha, and Rivka. So 4 total. So my Poppy plus 3 siblings, and 3 of them, the other siblings, went to Israel, and my Poppy, after England, made his way to a family member in Canada. And remember, they didn't have cell phones and internet back then, so it took years sometimes for siblings and family members who survived to find one another. there were newspapers going around, and excuse me to those of you who already know this, there were newspapers going around, and it would say, you know, Nusen Rosenberg from Pultusk, Poland has survived and is living in Toronto, Canada. Here's his number and his address. And then that, you know, newspaper would make its way to Israel, where all the survivors would read it. And that's how it took years and years to find each other. So what's amazing to me is, had my papi known that his siblings were in Israel, he would have gone to Israel, but he didn't know who. So I could have, you know, grown up in Israel, or I guess I wouldn't have been alive. He wouldn't have met my grandma here in the US. But it's just so crazy how, you know, every single decision he made just kind of affected like me and like how I would be here today and how I'm here to tell his story. Like I always think that, and how crazy and different it would be to grow up in Israel than to grow up here. So yeah, he eventually reconnected with them. Some of them, Rivka eventually moved to the US and her family is here. And then Simcha and Moisha, their kids and grandkids are in Israel. And some of them, Miriam and Asher and Sharon and Amir and Chen, they are like brothers and sisters to me. And they have always come here for weddings and bat mitzvahs and huge occasions. So yeah, Israel is obviously very close to my heart and my family there. And I'm always sending them messages like, look what I found on our great-great-grandfather, or look at the tombstone. So, you know, it's amazing. We feel so far removed, but we all come from the same great-grandparents. So it's pretty amazing.
And how has your work contributed to your family's understanding or knowledge of your papi's story, testimony, and just your family history in general?
You mean like, how does the work I'm doing like fuel them? That
inspiring them, but also I'm assuming you uncovered a lot of things, just like these documents that weren't there.
Yes.
So those contributions for your family.
So being on Fox was probably the best exposure I mean, I'm still getting so many random messages all the time, but I was on Fox and a guy just like turned on the TV one day and saw my story, and he happened to be like an amateur, he's a history teacher, but he taught himself Polish and he was a rabbi and he was like an amateur historian, and he just reached out to me and he was like, Dana, no charge, I'd love to do, you know, some research on your family. His name's Zach Rosenblatt. And he found all these incredible documents and a book that my great-great-grandfather, Natan Torfstein, the scholar, had written. And that was amazing. And then another historian reached out to me and said, Dana, I actually have a picture of your papi's mom, Sarah, which he hadn't seen forever. My papi had one aunt who, it was kind of like a scandalous story. She had run off to Argentina with a Jewish boyfriend before the war, but they didn't want to live this Orthodox life, and they ran to Argentina. And because they left before the war, she took some photos with her. And that's why I have that picture of my great-great-grandfather, because she escaped with her boyfriend, which is pretty amazing. Had she not escaped and betrayed her family, we wouldn't have any of these pictures. So she had the picture of the siblings that I used. She had that picture of my papi's grandmother, my papi's mother, which we just hadn't known about, and a historian had told me about. So it has been really remarkable and amazing. And I just figured out something else interesting. I haven't even told my parents this, but I went to the cemetery to see my great-great-grandfather, and that guy Eliyahu Kutner, who sends me all these documents, I have like 3 guys who are always sending me amazing documents. He goes, Dana, why was your great-grandfather buried in Warsaw? So I said, well, he was the chief rabbi of Stanislavov, which, you know, wasn't too far from Warsaw. And he goes, well, back then it was really far. It would have taken days on a horse and buggy to get his body there and for burial. And he was an ultra-religious man, and you know, you have to be buried within 24 hours. And then he found a letter that Natan Torfstein had written in 1921, the same year that he died, to an organization in the US asking for some help and charity for their poor town. So this guy and I put 2 and 2 together. my great-great-grandfather, and he's not buried next to any family. He's the chief rabbi of his town, the patriarch of the family, and he's buried just completely in a tombstone by himself. So he must have gotten sick and went to Warsaw because it had better hospitals and medical arrangements there. And he must have died in Warsaw, which is why he was buried there. I can't really think of anything else. And this guy who researches Holocaust all day long came up with this scenario. And what, Mom and Dad, what do you think? I think it actually might make sense. So that's pretty amazing. And had he not had this last minute tragic death, he wouldn't have been buried there and I would have never found his tombstone. You know, most cemeteries were completely pulverized during the war, and their tombstones were used to make streets and driveways. And this cemetery was so massive that the Nazis didn't touch it. So I don't know, this whole thing is pretty fascinating. And this was just last week that I found this out. So I'm always learning more and more.
Incredible.
What do you think about that?
You know what, Dana? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Everyone say hi to Debbie. Debbie and I are new best friends. We were one of 11 Americans invited by the Polish embassy on an all expenses paid trip to Poland. It was 9 days. We just got back. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago already? I can't keep track.
A week and a half ago.
We just got back, and Debbie is the child of a Holocaust survivor. And I'm so grateful that you came on tonight.
Oh, no, it's great. So I'll just add a little note to that. So my father was born in a shtetl about 90 miles from Vilna. And when my grandmother had her first child in their village, the child passed away. So the next 3 children, they actually went 90 miles to Vilna to the hospital so that they could be born. So maybe your thought is correct that they went to the big city because the help was there for him because it wasn't available in the small shtetls.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's nice to hear you confirm that. But it makes so much sense. Because he, you know, if he had been buried in his hometown, of course, he would have been in the plot next to his wife and his sons. And yeah, so that's fast. And how lucky am I that, and all of us, that he actually happened to pass the way he did. You think he could have ever imagined that his great-great-granddaughter would be sharing a picture to, you know, 100,000 people on social media 100 years later? Yeah. So it's just amazing how that works out. Thanks, Debbie. It's interesting.
So you touched upon a little bit about how we have these photos that you have to share. It was because a family member was able to keep them. And did that family member take it with them, or was it sent to them overseas?
My mom could probably answer that. It probably a combination of both, right? Taking them with and sent.
So it was my great aunt's
Poppy's daughter, by the way. So my mom is Poppy's
Hi, everyone.
daughter.
By the way, this is an excellent program. Dana, you're just so amazing. I'm so proud of you. And Michael, thank you for arranging this incredible program. So my aunt, who left Poland with her boyfriend, moved to Argentina. She had all the pictures. Then from Argentina, things started getting very bad, a lot of anti-Semitism. She moved to Israel, and she had shared those pictures with my family that was in Israel. And then my father was able to obtain a lot of those photos.
Yeah.
I'm glad they survived. But we have a similar situation in my family where our immediate family doesn't have it. My father's here right now. He saw for the first time his grandparents and his great-grandparents. For the first time, I found this photo of them from the 1920s, which was just incredible for us to see. So I can imagine just having these photos, it's cherishing things of community.
Somebody asked before about my father's younger brother, Moshe. Mm-hmm. So he's survived the war with my father's other brother, Simcha, who actually wasn't in the concentration camps. He was in the Russian army, and his sister, Regina. And unfortunately, they all passed away several years ago. But they had a very special bond. And my father, I believe he probably went to Israel about 25 times. He used to go every 2 years to visit his family, and they all came here for weddings and bat mitzvahs. And So at least they were able to connect, and they had a very, very strong bond.
Thank you. We do have a handful more questions. We'll take them one at a time. But first, I want to say there's also a lot of thank yous and notes. And one I want to read is from Eva, a Holocaust survivor, who writes, "For those of us survivors still around, just know how important and gratifying it is for us having 3 Gs, grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, continue carrying on the mission of remembering and giving testimony." So Eva, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's so important. This is definitely what we're here to do. It's like Dana said, it's our obligation, and one that I think we carry willingly. It's something that is very strong within us. It's important for us. It's not a burden, and I think that's the important thing.
Thank you. And I just shared the Mangala.
Joseph Mangala, also known as the.
Sorry. I just shared the Mangala clip in the chat for anyone who wants to watch it.
And so Dana, you also shared about your trips. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about them. But first, another question that was asked is, did your poppy ever go back home to visit his hometown? If he did, what was that like?
Yes. Mom, do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So my brother surprised my father with a trip to Poland because he thought my father would benefit from some closure. And my father did not want to go to Poland. He didn't consider himself Polish. He hated the Polish people for what they did to all the Jews. Even before the war, there was horrible anti-Semitism and pogroms going on. But he went begrudgingly with my brother to Poland, and they went to the town, and my father was not happy. He was angry. He was angry at the Polish government. He was angry about the Polish people. He was angry about being in Poland, and he did go back to his town, and he shared with one of the tour guides about his experience, and he was speaking in Polish. My father was fluent, and the Polish tour guide said, "Oh, I didn't know you were Polish." And my father said, "No, I'm not Polish. I was born in Poland, but I'm not Polish. I'm American. I was always treated like a dog. I couldn't even walk in the streets." And he just wanted to leave Poland so much. He didn't want to continue the trip, but he did. And that was the last time, and he said he would never go back again. So yes, he did go back to Poland. He did go back to his town.
So Debbie and I know I have this argument with my mom often. You know, I've gone to Poland twice now, and the Polish embassy just took us, and we thought it would be a propagandistic trip. I was with some incredibly intelligent people from huge organizations, and none of us felt that way at all.
That's how he felt, and
okay, I know.
I couldn't argue with the way he felt. So that was his experience. And then I think right after that, I think he took a plane right over to Israel.
So, you know, Debbie and I have had just a pretty interesting perspective since we've been there. You know, they allowed us to ask the really tough questions. They didn't make any excuses. In fact, they said, you know, the way the Polish government used to be was terrible and disgraceful, and that they are doing whatever they can do now to preserve Jewish life there. Now, they're not showing that as much support for Israel as a lot of us would like, but there is no doubt that they are doing everything they can to preserve Jewish history and culture there. There are countless, I cannot count, Jewish and Holocaust museums that are gorgeous and state-of-the-art and fully funded by the government all throughout the country. There are Judaic studies programs at many major universities throughout Poland that are run by non-Jewish professors and taken by non-Jewish students. We went to the Jewish Cultural Festival in Krakow, also organized by non-Jews. Many of them are just fascinated by the culture. Others feel a sense of guilt for the lack of Polish community there is now. Others think it's an obligation, and others just feel that it's a beautiful and right thing to do. So, you know, it's I'm saying I have very mixed feelings on Poland, because how can I feel pride in a country that was so terrible to my poppy? But what I tell everyone is I don't feel proud to be Polish, but I feel very drawn to the country. like when I'm there, I feel my ancestors' presence with me. And I'm trying to slowly figure out my relationship with Poland. And I'm thinking about getting my citizenship, my dual citizenship, which my parents are not very supportive of. Debbie, you have yours, and we've talked a lot about the pros and cons to that. So that's just where I'm at. If anyone has any other questions about that, we can talk about it another time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know there are mixed feelings about Poland. My grandmother herself from Romania/Hungary, she always said, although she was Hungarian, she doesn't consider herself Hungarian. She considers herself Romanian. That's the trajectory.
Right, and I get it. I wasn't living in Poland during a terrible time, so it's easy for me to be like, yeah, it's not that bad, right? So I can never put myself in my grandfather's shoes. I'm just very aware of all the different viewpoints.
Yeah, and that there are people who are trying to bring it to the attention of Polish people, et cetera. Yeah, I think that's important. And then another question, essentially, because you're Poppy's story, he did the Shoah videos. Did he speak about it? Now that we have your mom also here, did he speak about it when you were younger? Did he speak about it to both of you? What was it like for him before the Shoah Foundation video? Was he talking about it a lot or not at all?
So when I was growing up, my father was always working. He worked 2 jobs, and he never spoke about it that much. But of course, when I was little, I would ask him what his number was on his arm. I tried to wipe his number off his arm, and then he would start telling me a little bit about what happened, in a child's appropriate way. And later on, he started talking more about, his experience, obviously, when I got older. And I took a lot of Jewish studies courses when I went to college at CCNY, so I would brainstorm with him. But he really didn't talk that much about it until he was interviewed with Steven Spielberg's foundation. But one time we were in a restaurant, in a diner, and it was in the summer. My father, I don't know if you know the story, Dana, and my father was wearing short sleeves, and a woman kept staring at my father's arm. And I said to my father, there's like a very rude woman like staring at you. So my father joked around and he said, oh, maybe she has a crush on me. And she kept staring and staring and staring. And she came over to my father. I was with my mother and father. And she looked at his arm and she said to him, what is that number? Are you a Holocaust survivor? And my father said, yes. And she said, I've never met a Holocaust survivor, and I don't know anything about the Holocaust. And then she said, I'm very ashamed because I'm Jewish. And I grew up in a small town in Connecticut. There were no Jews. My parents were totally assimilated. I knew nothing about the Holocaust, and I moved to Long Island a few years ago. And I know a little bit about it now, but I never met anyone about this, that survived the concentration camps. And my father said, don't be ashamed. There's only one thing you could do. Go to the library and take out books and learn more about the Holocaust. And one day I said to my father, how come you never took that number off your arm? Did you ever think about doing that? And he said, no. He said, because I'm a proud survivor. I don't know if you knew that story, Dana.
No, I didn't. One thing about my Poppy, he never brought it up. But if you asked him about it, he would talk about it. But my mom, like many children of survivors, would get very protective. Like I would badger him with questions. And my mom would say, Dana, stop, that's enough. In recent years. And I was like, I'm not going to stop. Like, this is my only time to learn these stories. And yeah, it's hard for him in the moment to relive and to tell them. But if he didn't tell them, I wouldn't be able to keep them alive. So I never had any shame. And listen, I'm a generation removed. So I'm not yes, I'm protective over him, but I'm also on a mission. And I see that in a lot of the 3Gs who are active in this movement. And in recent years, as he got older, he would say to a doctor, if he was in the doctor's office, look at the number on my arm. But I think that's more just, elderly people and how his personality just started to change in his 90s. But his whole life, he was very humble and a very quiet man. And he would never talk about it unless someone asked.
This echoes very much to me, my life with my father and my grandmother, and you know, wanting to ask those questions and have her speak, and that protection over her, which I, you know, as an adult, I understand that. So a very complicated dialogue, yeah, but I very much appreciate that. Dana, a question that I wanted to ask you also is, you know, more about Holocaust education in a post-October 7th world. We're fighting a lot of what people would term as almost like a quote unquote Holocaust denial, where something is happening, people are denying that it happens, right? This kind of textbook form of anti-Semitism. So a Holocaust education in a post-October 7th world, but also now that your puppy is not here with you while you're doing his testimony in Holocaust education, can you share the difference between Holocaust education before both of these events and after? Is there a difference how we approach Holocaust education now for future generations?
Great question. And we actually have this like debate at the museum all the time. You know, I'm not an educator per se. I don't have an education degree, so I don't know if I should, you know, speak on that. What I can say is that I am very passionate about, you know, we all have different roles. Some people are, you know, there's an organization, Fuel for Truth, which focuses on the long Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I'm really trying to focus on Holocaust and keep that my mission and not bring Israel into it. While Israel is so important and we need a lot of other people to do that, but I am trying hard to focus on Holocaust because I do believe it all stems from education, and the more people who learn about what the Jews endured, hopefully will translate to why this land of Israel is so important and necessary for us. I do, though, in all my interviews now, at the very end, do a special focus on Israel, which our chairman, Alan Mindell, was really passionate about. And at the end of the interview, I ask, what is it like to see the rise in anti-Semitism now? What is it like to see what's happening in Gaza? What are your feelings on it? How do you compare the rise in anti-Semitism we're seeing now to Nazi Germany in the 1930s? So these are all questions that come into every single interview that I do. But in terms of the work that I do, I really try to stick with what I've been doing all along, and then throw in some Israel a little bit when I can. But in terms of how I educate, I think also the museum is trying very hard to focus, to not keep it political and to focus just on Holocaust. But it's very tough. We wrestle with this all the time.
Two more questions. Number one, what do you see as the future of Holocaust education or programming? Just in general, I mean, moving this, again, this idea of storyteller, it's so important to focus on stories when we're educating. So I love this title, but if someone said a Holocaust a storyteller, I would say, what, right? But it is so important and so beautiful. And for me, I feel like this is, you know, bringing it to a new level, focusing on the stories, the narratives, or reclaiming that narrative and sharing it in a space like you're doing on social media. So with that in mind, what do you see as the future of Holocaust education programming?
Listen, no one can take away the firsthand testimony and hearing from a survivor firsthand. So while we have our survivors, we are trying to do everything we can to get them into classrooms, get them into schools, bring students to our center to hear the words out of their mouths. But they're not going to be here for so much longer. I hope they are. But what I'm trying to do is capture as many of their stories as possible, because even though people might not be able to hear them firsthand, they can hear them through the video. So that's what I'm trying to do. But our focus now is definitely on the physical survivors who are still here. And I'm not cranking out my documentaries at such a fast rate these days because I have so many survivors left. And I interviewed this amazing man who passed away 3 weeks after I interviewed, and he was sharp as a knife. I interviewed another incredible survivor who died 2 months after I interviewed her. So I never say no to a survivor shoot. So I'm not having as much time to edit lately, but that's okay. I can always edit. I can't always capture them. So future is one, for as many years possible more, getting these survivors into schools and getting the schools to our center. And then after that, these legacy videos that I'll be using to keep their stories alive. And it's funny in terms of Storyteller, someone like sent me a nasty message like Storyteller, like that makes it sound like you're telling a fake story. And I said, well, I disagree. Everyone has a story to tell. You can have a true story, you can have a fake story, but they have stories. But I thought long and hard about what title to give myself, and nothing really felt like a better fit. Like journalist felt just too impersonal, reporter felt too impersonal. I'm telling their stories, and I'm also doing it all myself. I'm the videographer, I'm the writer, I'm the narrator. I am the one bringing this whole story to life. So that's how I came up with the storyteller title. And listen, everyone's always going to hate, but for the most part, I've had a very, very, warm reception at HMTC, and the support I've been getting has been phenomenal, and the relationships that I've built with survivors is beyond. And I have one survivor, Leo Ullman. He's like my partner in crime for everything. I set up for him to throw out the first pitch at Citi Field last year on my birthday, coincidentally. He's come on CBS with me, on Fox 5 with me. I was on BBC this year. They gave me 5 full minutes to talk about my grandfather on Holocaust Remembrance Day. So, I'm just trying to forge those relationships, get my name out there as much as possible. Because with my name out there, that's the museum's name out there. That's all 3G's names out there. That's Holocaust. We're all intertwined. So that's really my mission.
You're doing an incredible job. And like I said, just the idea of refocusing Holocaust education in my mind to think about it as storytelling or people's stories. It was an incredible eye-opening thing where I said, oh my God, that's exactly what this is. So, I love the title because it really refocuses the education on the survivors and their testimony or their stories. So beautiful. I just want to say one more thing. So definitely, we're going to give the links to HMTC, Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, and 3GNY for you to learn more about it. If you feel so inclined or so moved to donate to these organizations, please do. Feel free to put a memo, Dana Arschin and or 3GNY, just so they know that it's coming because of this. With that, I want to give you the last word. Anything you want to leave us with? One thing I'm thinking is that your Poppy, even though he went through so much, he talks about being this resilient and strong person, and then we see you and your beautiful daughter on screen. So maybe if there's anything that you can leave us with, something to press apart.
Yeah, I feel him with me every day. My mom and I always say this, we just don't really feel like he's gone yet. And I thought that going to Poland a few weeks ago would kind of make it set in, and it didn't at all. I still really feel his force and his presence. And the fact that you're all on here today means that you're inspired in some way or connected in some way. It is all of our responsibilities. And to our non-Jewish friends who are here, thank you, thank you, thank you for being our ally. I know Anthony, who is on this, who is one of my viewers starting from News 12. Anthony writes all over social media his support for us and for the Jewish people. And, it means so much more coming from the non-Jewish community, and I can't thank you enough. And take what you heard today. You are now a witness. I'm blanking on the expression, you might know it, but once you hear a witness, you become a witness. You are now a witness, and it is all of your responsibilities, just like it's mine, to share these stories and make sure the world never forgets. Some people might think, oh, I only have 5 followers on social media, so it doesn't make sense for me to post. You might inspire one of your 5 followers who then inspires their 10 followers, who then inspires their, there is no amount of following or audience that is too small. So just go be that messenger, and we can't stop anti-Semitism as it's climbing, but we can try to curb it one person at a time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dana. Thank you to your amazing parents. Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to the survivors. Thank you to Eva. Everyone, thank you. And again, August 11th, Yadin Gelman, and also to join us for a 3G event that Dana is hosting with HMTC. I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much, Dana. Thank you for everything you do and for being here tonight with us.
Thank you, Michael. You're amazing. And if anyone does donate to HMTC, if you go to hmtcli.org/stories, you can donate specifically to my storytelling fund. They keep it there in case my camera equipment ever breaks down, or I need a new battery or a new microphone, or anything like that. So if you want to donate, you can donate right to my stories page. So hmtcli.org/stories. And I thank you guys. Thank you so much, Michael. You're amazing. I can go on and on. Again, just the fact that like I've made this my career, but you volunteer your time on top of your full-time career. So I'm so grateful to you, and thank you for everything. And again, to my parents for always encouraging. I feel like my dad wants to chime in. What's up, Dad?
Dad, please do. We always got time for you.
Can you unmute him?
Yeah, Arthur, give me 1 second. Best. Oh, there we go.
Wait, he's still muted.
Ask to unmute, so you just gotta.
Dad, you have to press. There we go.
Hi. Dana, I'm so proud of you. As you know, you're a very unique person that you've undertaken this difficult but amazing journey to discover everything about your grandfather and what he went through. Now, I had the luxury of going to shul with him a lot on the holidays, and he had a machzor that was one side in Yiddish, one side in Hebrew. He was able to translate anything he read into the other language automatically. And he was very excited. He was very proud of the importance you've given to his journey. And I was very privileged too, because I spoke to him a lot and heard a lot of amazing stories. Some of them I may have articulated to you. There were so many and so unusual and so varied. Very quickly, once he was singing a song, and it was in Greek. And that song, I said, how did you know that song? And it was a song that didn't last for a minute. It went on for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. And it was not a repeat. It was, the words just continued and they were different. And he said, those were the words of the Jews from Greece who came to Auschwitz. They were used to a very warm climate. They came to Poland in the winter, and they would die singing that song. And he remembered the lyrics of the words of the song, and he would sing it amazingly. And I taped it years ago. Unfortunately, I lost the tape. But every time I spoke to him, he would have a story that I hadn't heard before, some amazing thing that he saw, that he experienced. And one last thing I'd like to say, when you were married, I believe, your cousins came over from Israel. His younger brother, Moshe, went over to him. And so when was it? It was an event, but the old brother, your father and he were together in Auschwitz, your grandfather. And what had happened was Moshe was very ill and was taken to another place. And usually when you're taken to that place, you don't last very long. And what your grandfather did was he would get food. He would distract the German guard dogs that were chained up. He'd throw something at them. And while they went to pursue what he threw, he would grab the food from the dogs and he would bring that food to his younger brother. And many years later, when he was in the States, he spoke to your dad and said, your grandfather, and said, Nat, I never forgot that. That can't be a lie. I just want to end on that. It was moving for him to, it was moving for him to tell me that each time he told it. But it was such a remarkable story. But it tells you how much he loved his family and his religion. And he'd be excelling now with what you're saying. So thanks.
Amen.
That's my pappy's son-in-law, but as you can tell, they had a really special, beautiful relationship. For anyone unfamiliar, my dad was saying that in Auschwitz, or if that was unclear, in Auschwitz, my papi went out of his way to bring extra food to Moishe when Moishe was very sick in Auschwitz when they reconnected there. And papi didn't remember this. Moishe told him decades later at a bat mitzvah that he came to in the US. He said, Nat, you saved my life when you did this. So it was really special for all of us to hear that story then.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Dad.
Again, thank you, Dana. Thank you, everyone.
It's amazing. I didn't cry tonight. I almost did, but I have, we never know if I'm going to cry or not when I do these. 50-50 chance. But no, I could talk about him every day, and it's still, you know, I never am numb from it. It always hits me just the same each time. So thank you. I know we could all stay on here forever. I'm so grateful. And is this being recorded, Michael? And how can everyone see it after?
We'll share it. I'll send the email with the link to this recording and to the link to the things that we mentioned, the articles and the web pages and the events.
Beautiful. Thank you to Lori and Ed Mantell for raising such an amazing son.
Ditto to your parents.
Well, thank you, everyone. Please feel free to reach out, send me a private message. I'm so happy to keep in touch and to talk. And I'm so grateful. Debbie, love you. We'll be in touch. And everyone else, I still don't have a clear view of everyone. I have to slowly go down one at a time. So if I didn't give you a shout out, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for being on here.
You take care, everyone. Be well. Bye.